Hey guys, welcome back. So I've got a whole bunch of new cards to show you today. So let's get straight into it with a really interesting neutral minion. And this is called the Conjured Illusion. Now this is a 4 mana, 3 attack, 10 health minion, which is amazing stats for that value. With Taunt as well, which makes it even better. But at the start of your turn, you shuffle this card back into your deck. So it's very interesting, a bit confusing at first, but it's kind of like a neutral timeout. So timeout is the paladin spell that when you play it, you can't take any damage to your hero that turn. So playing this does a similar thing, apart from it is worse because one, it costs 4 mana, and 2, you can still be targeted by spells, and they could kill this and then still do extra damage to your face. So that's the other downside of it. But then at the start of your turn, it goes back into your deck. So that kind of means that you're paying 4 mana to do nothing. All you're doing with that 4 mana is potentially stopping your opponent doing any damage to your face, which can be very important at certain times. The other thing that this does is it kind of means you are completely anti-fatigue, because when you play this, if your opponent doesn't kill it, it will go into your deck and you just can keep going infinite with like that. But the thing is, your opponent won't want to really attack into this the turn you're playing it. One use could be for against aggro decks. So if your opponent's got a lot of minions on the board and you just play this down, they won't want to trade into this unless they can kill it and do more damage. So they'll hold their board and then they'll wait for your card to go back into your deck. So that has positives and negatives. One, you could then follow this play up with a board clear. Maybe you're waiting for that big board clear and you haven't quite got the mana yet. It delays the game, makes it more potentially better, so you can do that. But the downside is if you don't have a follow-up, then your opponent you skip your turn by playing this, your opponent skips their turn because they don't want to trade into it, and then you start again and they have the same board. It's not like Doomsayer where it clears the board. So there are some interesting things to do with this. I think Silence Priest would like this just because of the pure stats that you can put on the board. Obviously when you silence it you lose Taunt, but it won't go into your deck, so you could Divine Spirit and Inner Fire it. So that's pretty dangerous actually to do that kind of combo on this card. So yeah, it's really difficult to assess because we haven't seen cards like this before in Hearthstone. But I think because if you're planning to buff it at all, you need to silence it first, which makes it also difficult. And it's a very defensive card because the only way to be aggressive with it as well, the only way that you're ever going to attack with this is if you silence it first. So I don't know. There's going to be some funny situations where you evolve into this and it's very good on that turn, but then you lose it the next turn. So a really fun and interesting card. I don't think it will see too much competitive play because although it is a neutral timeout, I don't think it's as good as timeout itself. So yeah, a weird one. Let me know what you think about this one in the comments, guys, because I'm not quite sure what to make of it. Next up, let's take a look at Rogue, and they're getting a very interesting minion called the Pharaoh Cat. It's a 1 mana 1/2 beast, and it has the Battlecry of add a random Reborn minion to your hand. This card's very strong. If you compare it to any other cards, the Swashbuckler was a 1 mana 1/1, a very good card for Rogue, which added a random card from your opponent's class to your hand. This does a similar thing, but has 1 extra health. It's got the same stats as Town Crier, but Town Crier would draw a Rush minion from your deck. This gives you a random Reborn minion. I think the Town Crier is better because the Rush minion was a minion that you wanted in your deck, and it thins out your deck and it draws you a card that you're going to want to play. This has a similar sort of power level, but the problem is it gives you a random Reborn minion. You don't know whether it's going to be good. You don't know whether it's going to be playable. And that is a bit of a downside, if I'm being honest. I still don't think this stops this from being played. I think this is a 1-drop which goes into a lot of Rogue decks, because being able to play a minion on the board which has decent stats for its mana cost and also regenerates your hand a little bit is very good in Hearthstone. Swashbuckler was good because it could activate your thief mechanics. Rogue has Underbelly Fence and also Vendetta, which are 2 very strong cards in that class at the moment. Being able to activate them in the early game is really important. So important that people have been playing Pilfer in their deck at certain points, and Pilfer is the 1 mana spell. This card's better than Pilfer, I would say, but it doesn't always generate a minion from another class. There are a lot of neutral Reborn minions that you can get from this, and if you get a neutral minion, it won't activate your Underbelly Fence or your Vendetta. So that is a bit of an issue for me. I still don't think it stops it being played, but it stops it potentially being very strong for a Thief Rogue deck. Maybe a Tempo Rogue could still play this and be happy with it. I don't think a Thief Rogue can rely on it. Now, it can't rely on the Thief mechanics, but it can rely on the card generation, which might still make it a positive part of those kind of decks. But then when you look at the Reborn minions it can get, let's think about the good ones it can get. Micro Mummy is the minion in Paladin, 2 mana, and it's a 2/1 mech that at the end of the turn gives it a random minion +1 attack. Rogue would love that card. You play the Pharaoh Cat on 1, then you play Micro Mummy on 2. That's great. Same goes for Grand Mummy. I think that could be very good. That's the Priest one, which has Reborn, Death Rattle, give a minion +1/+1. Again, Rogue would love to do that. Mermy's pretty good. That's 1 mana 1/1. Summons itself back with Reborn. The Generous Mummy is a 3 mana 5/4 with Reborn. Your opponent's cards cost 1 less. And then we've also got Restless Mummy, which I think would be a really good one. That's the Warrior minion as Rush and Reborn, and it's 3/2. That was actually one of the first cards announced. There's other Reborn minions as well that are in the game. You could get Colossus of the Moon, that's Divine Shield and Reborn, that's 10 mana. That isn't something you would want because you don't want to get a card on turn 1 that you can't play until turn 10. Maybe you could generate that late game and it's very good, but not potentially in the early game. So we haven't seen all the Reborn minions. I expect we'll see more. I expect we'll see more neutrals and class Reborn minions. So the pool could get quite big, and then you don't know how good it's going to be, the cards you get. If too often that card is useless, maybe the Pharaoh Cat won't see play. But just on its own, as we see it now, I think it's a very good card. Next, we've got a really interesting card, which is probably less good, but still pretty awesome. This is Shadow of Death. It's a 4 mana epic spell. So very much like Academic Espionage. This has a really cool effect of choose a minion, shuffle 3 shadows into your deck that summon a copy when drawn. So this is the same shuffle mechanics we've seen before. You can double it up with Elic, for example. And then the minion that you've chosen, it can be your minion or an enemy minion, will be summoned onto the board when this is drawn, and then you'll draw another card. So a really cool effect. The downsides are you don't get Battlecry effects. So when the minion comes out, it's summoned. So you're not going to, if you're expecting to get a big Battlecry 3 extra times, then that's not going to happen. But unfortunately, that's also a positive with Leroy Jenkins. And that is the one blot on this card. I'm tired of dying to Leroy Jenkins. I think it happens far too much in the game right now. You play Leroy Jenkins, you hit your opponent in the face, then you play Shadow of Death. And then the next turn you could Mara's Unstable Element, get 3 more Leroys. Or you could Mara's first, then play this and guaranteed draw 3 Leroys afterwards and draw them out with other draw cards you've used. It's just too many ways to do that with Leroy. But there'll be some other awesome ways to do this. Highkeeper Ra is the 2020 minion that you could get. Imagine if you got that on him and just summon a 2020 minion card 3 times. That's pretty cool. Anything with good death rattles, anything with taunt, so Ziliax is a very good target for this card. Is it enough to see play? Because of the nerf to preparation, this will be 2 mana even if you use it with preparation. And to play it for 4 mana on the turn that it's played, as we've seen with Academic Espionage, it's too slow. It is too slow to do that. This can have instant effects, unlike Academic Espionage, though. So it does have a little bit of potential. It's got the potential to be fun, and I'm definitely going to enjoy playing with this card. But please don't play it on Leroy, guys, if you're listening. Please don't. Even though that would be a game-winning play for sure. Next, we have the Mortuary Machine. This is a 5 mana 8/8 mech. So we've seen these 5 mana 8/8s before. Bittertide Hydra, for example, is a 5 mana 8/8, and they always have drawbacks. This drawback is after your opponent plays a minion, give it Reborn. So that to me is a pretty big drawback. Your minion can play any minion they like, and they will get Reborn on it. Now, where you usually play these sort of cards is in aggro decks that don't care about the downside. They just care about killing you. And if your opponent has the answer, they win. And if they don't, then you win. You just keep pushing that damage. And this is kind of one of those cards. And I would be less enthusiastic about it if it wasn't a mech. And the fact that it's a mech means that cards like War Gear just make this pretty huge, right? Because you can play this on turn 5. And then if your opponent doesn't have a taunt, I'll get into that later, then you can just add more mechs to this. And it really is game winning at that stage in the game. The problem is if your opponent does have just 1 taunt in their hand, then it gives their taunt Reborn, and it kind of ruins what you're trying to do as an aggro deck. So that is where I think Bittertide Hydra could lose you the game. but I think it could lose you the game far less than this card can. I think the drawback of this is worse than Bitterside Hydra, because Hydra, you know, as an aggro deck, usually by turn 5, your opponent, depending on who you're playing against, is just trying to survive on the board. They're trading with your minions. They're not concerned with your health. That's why the Hydra was kind of good, because you're also not concerned about your health. You should be at full health at that point, and then taking 3 damage here or there is not too much of an issue. But giving your opponent Reborn, I don't know, it can just completely disrupt you if they have the right minions. Silence Priest will definitely look at this though, because once it's silenced, it's still a mech, so you can put other mechs onto it after it's been silenced, but it won't have the effect for your opponent. So Silence Priest could use this kind of card because it's nice aggressively statted that you could just silence, summon a copy of it, and then not even have the downsides of it. So right now I don't think it's as good as Bitterside Hydra. I think it's too much of a drawback to put into most decks, but we'll see. It does have some potential. Now let's have a look at Pharaoh's Blessing for Paladin. It's a 6-mana spell, it's rare, and it gives a minion 4/4, Divine Shield and Taunt. I'm not that excited about this card. Basically it's Blessing of Kings, which gives a minion +4/4, and you get Divine Shield and Taunt. And 6-mana spell is very good for Paladin to play if you're playing Sheer Valor, because it's nice to reduce the cost of Sheer Valor. It's an expensive spell to do that, but I don't really see anybody wanting to play this specifically right now. Blessing of Kings is a good card, but it's not always good. It's not in every single meta. Just giving a minion +4/4 is great, because if it's already been on the board for a turn, you can hit face with it, you can trade it with minions. That's great. In this instance, Pharaoh's Blessing would also be very good because of the Divine Shield. It gives you a free trade with something, and you're buffing it 4/4, so likely what you're trading into will be able to kill something. But I think it doesn't actually have much of a place in the meta. If you think 2 mana to give a minion Divine Shield and Taunt is okay, packaged in with +4/4 for 6 mana, it's okay. I just don't see many decks wanting to play this. Sunwalker is a 6 mana 4/5 minion with Divine Shield and Taunt, and that doesn't get played at all really. It's okay in itself, but this has the advantage of being able to give it to another minion, so you give certain minions that shouldn't have Taunt and Divine Shield, etc. And I still don't think it's that great. It's a bit too slow, a bit too expensive. I don't really see a place in the meta for it right now, but maybe someday, maybe some point. Next is Embalming, and I do see a place for this card. I think this is very strong for Priest. It's common as well. 1 mana spell. I mean, cheap spells, always you have to be on the lookout, and this has a really powerful effect of give a minion Reborn. So 1 mana spell, you can put 2 copies of this in your deck to resummon any minion. Now don't forget, Reborn's slightly different to resummon, because when they come back they only have 1 health, so that's quite a significant downside, because it means when they come back your opponent can deal with it quite easily. But in Priest it's a good class to be able to do that, because you can heal them back up. You've got lots of ways to heal minions, so I think this is a very strong card in Res Priest. And the reason it's good in Res Priest is because when you kill a minion and you've given it Reborn, you can kill 2 copies of that minion. It puts 2 copies into your res pool, which is so much better than just 1, because it increases your chances of being able to res it later on. So this sort of card, it goes very well into Priest. You can put this on Taunt minions. It's great to resummon them. It's also especially good with Death Rattles. So if there's any big Death Rattles, just paying 1 mana to replay that Death Rattle can often be very strong. So yes, it's weak to your minion being silenced, but I think this definitely has a place in Priest. Now, the thing to know is you can put 2 copies of this in your deck, but you won't be able to play Reborn on the same minion twice. Reborn minions that are Reborn, when they come back, they don't keep the buffs that they had previously. So I'm not certain, but I think the way this would work, if you put Reborn on this twice, I think the minion would come back once, and it would just, that would be it. You would have wasted the 2nd copy of Embalming. That's how I read it. That's how I think it should play. Hearthstone doesn't always work that way, so maybe you would resummon 2 minions, or the Reborn minion that comes back will have Reborn as well, but I really don't think that's how it works. So this is very strong. You could even use this on Wild Pyromancer. Really good board clear. Wild Pyromancer in Priest is often very strong against token decks, and being able to play your Pyromancer and have a cheap spell to play is really important. But then being able to bring your Pyromancer back to life again, because Pyromancer kills itself, is also really strong. So I think this could be very, very flexible, very good, and can go into a lot of different priest decks. Not just res priest decks, although that's the best place for them, but any sort of deck that wants value, I think this can be very good. Because we've all been looking at Reborn thinking, is Reborn going to be any good? Are the minions any good? And they've been a little bit underwhelming so far. But this card just allows any minion in the game to have Reborn. Any big death rattle, any big end of turn effect, you can just give Reborn to it, and it really can improve that card. So I like this. It's really flexible, very strong card for Priest. Two other things that I want to say very quickly about this card is that Xeric Master Cloner is very good with this card, because when you cast a spell on him, he will resummon himself, and of course a Reborn will resummon him as well. So when he dies, you'll get a 5/5 back from his effect of having the spell cast on him, and you would get a 5/1 with Reborn that you could heal or cast another spell on, and you can see how Xeric will keep multiplying. The other thing about Embalming is it's give a minion Reborn, not just a friendly minion, so you could give it to an opponent's minion that they don't particularly want. So if they've got a negative death rattle or a negative end of turn effect or anything they're trying to get rid of, you could actually give them Reborn, and then it makes it harder for them to get rid of, or it duplicates the negative effect. So that's quite cool. I think that's another cool use for it, so I really like this card. Next, speaking of strong cards, we have Tomb Warden, which is 8 mana, 3 attack, 6 health mech. Taunt, Battlecry, summon a copy of this minion. Now, this card is very good. It's basically an unnerfed Saronite Chain Gang with some different stats. So 8 mana, what you're playing, if you play this just on its own, you're getting 2 3/6 minions with Taunt. So that's 12/6 in stats for 8 mana, which is already good. And on top of that, they've got Taunt, and is a mech. I cannot believe they made this card a mech. I don't know why they did. I really think it shouldn't be. Just because then it adds all these other things, like it can have Rush with Dr. Boom. And also, probably more importantly, this puts 2 mechs on the board, which can then give you more targets to use your magnetic abilities. So this is a very strong card. Now, obviously, it's aimed more towards Taunt Warrior. We've seen the other cards that buff your cards, buff your Taunt cards in your hand. If you buff this, it's like a pre-nerf Saronite Chain Gang. The second copy will be buffed as well, because it's summon a copy of this minion. So then you just get even more insane stats. It's a rare card. You can put 2 copies of this. You can discover it off of a Mega Assembly. You can discover it off of Dr. Boom. This card's very good. I don't think Warrior needs any more good cards. I think this, I like the card because I think Taunt Warrior could be quite fun to play. I just wish they didn't make it a mech, because the reason, now that it's a mech, even if you're playing other warriors without any of the Taunt buff cards, you will still discover this from a Mega Assembly and also from Dr. Boom's Hero Power, and it will be played quite often, because in a control warrior, being able to play an 8 mana card that has 6 damage of Rush from the 2 minions and also Taunt is just really good. You're going to see this quite a lot discovered. Now, just looking specifically at Taunt Warrior, this is a very good card to go into the deck. We've seen some very strong cards that can be included in it. I'm a little bit worried about that whole archetype being good, just because there's only 3 buff cards at the moment. 2 copies of the Into the Fray, and then 1 copy of Armadillo. So is that really enough to buff all these minions that you're going to be having? But I think there's a lot of value to be had there if you can draw those cards. So we'll see. This is a late game card, so it's going to be coming out on turn 8. You do have to spend most of your turn to play it, so that is one of the downsides. But man, it's a strong card. I think we're going to see a lot of it. And Warrior again, another strong card for Warrior only class. Next we have another Reborn minion. This is Bone Wraith. 4 mana, 2 attack, 5 health, Taunt and Reborn. I think this is a very strong card. I think this will be seen in a lot of anti-aggro decks. If you look at some of the best anti-aggro cards in the past, you've got Sludge Belcher at 5 mana, you've got Tar Creeper at 3 mana, and you've got Stonehill Defender at 3 mana as well. I think this one kind of fits into that category. I think one of the downsides about it is that it's only got 2 attack. So I think ultimately, if you, Tar Creeper's rotated out now, but if you had a choice between the 2 in an anti-aggro deck, I think you would play Tar Creeper over this one. 1, it's cheaper. 2, the 3 attack I think was so important, and the fact that it had 5 health as well just meant that it was really good. This one has 5 health, but don't forget when it comes back, it's going to be 1 health. So yes, that's going to be a problem for certain decks, easy for your opponent to remove, but it's just a sticky minion to put down on turn 4. I don't think the card's OP, I just think it's a nice neutral taunt minion that anti-aggro decks might consider. Like I said, I'm a little bit worried about it only having 2 attack, but ultimately I think it's a pretty good card. And if you can have a deck that synergizes with, like Taunt Warrior, synergizes with buffing this, but also synergizes with healing the Reborn minion, then I think it's a very good option to be anti-aggro, basically. I think Priest could make some good uses of this. So yeah, it's pretty nice. It's, you know, the new Priest Legendary that buffs the minions at health. This is really good because you could put this down, give it buff, but it comes back as a taunt, which would then protect the legendary minion as well. So yeah, Bone Roast's pretty good. Now let's take a look at a new Lackey that's being introduced into the game. This is the only Lackey we're going to get. It's not a collectible card that you can open in your packs, but it goes in the pool with the other Lackeys and you get it off of your Lackey generation cards. It's Titanic Lucky, 1 mana 1/1 like all of them with a Battlecry, give a friendly minion plus 2 health and taunt. So I think looking at this already, this to me makes the Lackey pool a little bit weaker. Plus 2 health and taunt has situations where it will be excellent, decks where it will be excellent, but I think a lot of the Lackey's generation decks that are in the game at the moment probably wouldn't want to get this one. If you think of Rogue in particular, plus 2 health and taunt is okay, you would use it, but you don't want it over the other Lackeys in my opinion. I think Zoo, like Warlock, looks like it's going to be a Lackey deck. They've got a lot of good Lackey cards. There's another one coming up that I'll show you. And if you're playing a Zoo deck, then I think you might like this. I'm not sure you'd like it over the other ones, but if you can give a random friendly minion plus 2 health, you give it a trade and it survives because of that, I think then it's worthwhile. So it's got some good uses, but I think ultimately some of the others are better than this one, and it probably makes the whole pool a little bit weaker, but still fine. I think it's still okay. And then speaking of Lackeys, we're moving on to Warrior. And this again goes with the quest. I did underestimate the quest when I did my review of it. Thanks for correcting me, guys. But the hero power does refresh at the end of the turn, obviously. So Livewire Lance would obviously go into that because it's a 3 mana 2/2 weapon. After your hero attacks, add a Lackey to your hand. So this gives you a lot of value for a 3 mana card to generate 2 Lackeys. Well, we've seen that with the Evil Miscreant in Rogue. That was very strong. That card is very good. Does having 2 weapon swings make it better, and also only being able to generate the Lackeys over 2 turns? I don't think this is as good as Evil Miscreant. I know they're very different cards in very different classes, but I don't think for 3 mana this is an amazing play. Now you get a Lackey instantly to your hand. The problem with a 3 mana weapon that only has 2 attack is, what is it going to do to the board? Yes, you can get some trades. Yes, you can kill other opponents, Lackeys, etc. But is it going to be enough? Now you do get the tempo back a little bit with the Lackey that you generate, but you do have to pay that for 1 mana. So this synergizes with the quest as well, obviously, because it's another weapon that you can attack with. So I think it's okay. I just don't know how good it is. It generates you a lot of value. I just don't know whether you would want to play a 2 attack weapon in Warrior. That's the question. Warrior's got so many good cards. So Taunt Warrior also looks awesome. So I don't know whether they would want to cut any cards to play this, or play Lackeys in general, to be honest. But we'll see. It is a good value generation card that will be in the game for the next couple of years. So if ever a Lackey Warrior becomes viable, then this will be part of it. Next, we've got another weapon for Hunter this time called Desert Spear. This is another 3 mana weapon which I'm unsure about. 1 attack and 3 durability. So ultimately this is bad to play 3 mana for, because when you look at Candle Shot, that was a 1 mana card that had a 1/3 durability and your hero couldn't take damage. That was a very good weapon because it filled that slot of early game control and also worked with other cards like Hunter's Mark. This does work with Hunter's Mark as well, but after your hero attacks, summon a 1/1 Locust with Rush is where this weapon starts to get a bit interesting. So over 3 turns, you will summon 3 1/1s. Those 3 1/1s are beasts, so they will synergize with other things like Houndmaster. You could give one of the Locusts 2/2 and Taunt with your Houndmaster. You can buff them with Dire Frenzy. Not that I think you would want to, but it's not terrible. But you know, if you needed to, it's an extra bit of damage. You could Dire Frenzy 1, and then when you draw the Locust again, it will be a 4/4 with Rush. That's not bad. But really, unless you're buffing it with Leok or any other buff boards or using the beast synergies, it's not amazing. Sometimes being able to do 1 damage to one minion, then having another minion that could do 1 damage elsewhere is better than just having a 2 attack weapon. Because you can buff those 1/1s, and also because I think you could then direct the damage at the same target or to different targets depending on the situation. So it does have some flexibility. And I think where this could be especially good is with cards like the Scavenging Hyena. Because the Locusts are beasts, they will die and buff your Scavenging Hyena. So it's got some uses. I just don't know. It's competing with the Eaglehorn Bow, which is very nice at 3 mana if you're playing Secrets along with it. Do you want to play this? We'll have to see. Any card that generates beasts with Rush can be good in Hunter. We've seen that before. They've got so many good beast synergies. I just don't know why these are Locusts and not bees. But anyway, an interesting card, one which I'm not sure Hunter will need, but we can definitely find some good uses for it. Now let's move on to another Lackey card. This is for Warlock. It's a legendary Dark Pharaoh Toucan, 5 mana 4/4. And wow, this has got a powerful effect. Battlecry: for the rest of the game, your lackeys are 4/4s. So it's a bit like the quest for Rogue, the Rogue quest, but it only applies to your lackeys. The other important distinction is those lackeys can then be buffed to more than 4/4s. It's not like the Rogue quest where they always remain as a 4/4. Wow, I think that's some incredible value. Even if you play this once and then just play 1 lackey, you're getting enough value for this card to be worthwhile. It is a legendary though, so you can only put 1 copy in your deck. Are you going to be able to play it before you draw all your Lackey Generation cards? Warlock doesn't have a lot of Lackey Generations, but based on the cards that we've seen, I imagine that they're going to be getting another one this expansion. And if they do, and you have a consistent way of generating lots of Lackeys in Warlock, then this is going to be a very strong card for that. Evil Recruiter is their 3/3 minion that destroys a Lackey, a friendly Lackey, to summon a 5/5 demon. Now, if your Lackey's already a 4/4, you wouldn't necessarily want to use those 2 cards together. But I think both of them individually, both effects individually, are so strong that you would definitely put them in the same deck. And once you've made a trade with your 4/4, if it's still alive, you might not be too sad about killing it to summon a 5/5. So Warlock Lackeys seem pretty decent. They just need some more generation, in my opinion, because at the moment there isn't enough. But this card is, the effect is insane if you can get a bunch of Lackeys to be regenerated constantly. Like, imagine if this was in Rogue in the previous expansion, when Rogue was using Vanish and Shadow Step to generate all these Lackeys over and over again. If you had this sort of card in that deck, then it would be insane. But it remains to be seen, but the effect is very, very powerful. And then finally for today we have a demon. This is Vile Fiend, 2 mana 2/2 with Lifesteal. It is neutral, which is interesting because it's a demon, but ultimately the only class that makes uses of demons is Warlock. This isn't a very good card to me right now. The problem with getting Lifesteal on turn 2 is often your hero isn't even damaged, so what does it even do? You play it late game, it's very easy to kill, and you're only healing 2 health. So it's not a very good card in my opinion, but any card with Lifesteal with any sort of effect that gets put into Hearthstone could eventually become good at some point. I don't see it right now, but maybe there'll be some cards that buff your 2 mana minions to 10/10s or something, and then you would play this, something like this potentially. So it's the sort of card that's going to be in the game. It's not going to go into any decks right now unless we see some other synergies. Alright guys, well thanks for watching. That's all the cards we've got to see today. There will be more cards coming out tomorrow, so I'll be back with another video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.